Cambodia was a nation under various regimes, from French colonial rule until the Japanese occupation in 1941, then again as a French colony until 1953, when it became an independent kingdom from 1953 to 1970. Later, it became a short-lived republic from 1970 to 1975 until overthrown by the Khmer Rouge regime in 1975, which ended in 1979. It remained a communist country until 1993, when it once again became a kingdom. Cambodia was a major sanctuary and supply base for the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces, where they were protected from American military operations until the election of President Richard M. Nixon in 1968. Following the end of the Allied involvement in Vietnam, a communist regime took power in Cambodia, just as one erupted in Laos, and millions would die as a result of one madman. What were the killing fields of Cambodia? Why did the communist regime of Vietnam go to war with its former communist ally and supporter? How did Pol Pot join Stalin, Mao, Hitler, and others in the pantheon of mass murderers? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former soldier, Marine Corps Scout Sniper, history professor, historian, and book author, and we will answer these questions and other issues on this segment of Forgotten History. Saloth Sâr, better known by his nom de guerre, Pol Pot, was born on May 19, 1925 in Prek Sabav, located about 100 miles north of the Cambodian capital, Phnom Penh. He came from a rich family that owned some 50 acres of rice paddy, 10 times the national average. In 1934, Pol Pot moved to Phnom Penh, where he spent a year at a Buddhist monastery before attending a French Catholic primary school. In 1949, he went to Paris on a scholarship. While there, he studied radio technology and became quite active in communist groups. In January 1953, when Pol Pot returned to Cambodia, the whole region was in active revolt against French colonial rule. Cambodia officially gained its independence from France later that year, as did Indochina the next year, which became Vietnam and Laos. Pol Pot, meanwhile, joined the Communist Khmer People's Revolutionary Party, the KPRP, established in 1951 with support of the North Vietnamese in opposition to French occupation. From 1956 to 1963, Pol Pot taught history, geography, and French literature at a private school, while simultaneously plotting a revolution. During the Vietnam War, Cambodia was one of the few sanctuaries for Communist Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces fighting the Allied coalition. Cambodia was officially off-limits to American forces as they pursued the enemy along the Ho Chi Minh Trail and across the Mekong River. Norodom Sihanouk was the hereditary prince of the royal family and the national leader, but he was a political survivor, and when it suited him, he supported whichever political entity rose to the occasion. He courted Ho Chi Minh and China, entertained the communist revolutionaries in his country, and later supported Pol Pot and agreed with the programs of re-education. Due to Cambodia violating its self-stated neutrality in the war, in March 1969, U.S. President Richard M. Nixon ordered a secret bombing campaign as well as military ground operations into Cambodia to interdict and destroy enemy troops and camps. Over the span of 4 years, U.S. planes dropped 500,000 tons of bombs on Cambodia, more than 3 times the amount dropped on Japan during World War II. These operations killed tens of thousands of communist soldiers and supporters and brought the communists of China, North Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos even closer into a rather fragile alliance. By the time the U.S. bombing campaign ended in August 1973, the number of Khmer Rouge troops had increased exponentially, and they now controlled approximately 3/4 of Cambodia's territory. Soon after, they began shelling the capital Phnom Penh with rockets and artillery. The Cambodian Civil War was in full swing, and final assaults on the refugee-filled capital started in January 1975, with the Khmer Rouge bombarding the airport and blockading river crossings. China and North Vietnam were the primary Khmer Rouge supporters during the Civil War. As a result of their influence, the U.S. airlift of supplies failed to prevent thousands of children from starving. Finally, on April 17, 1975, the Khmer Rouge entered the city, winning the Civil War and ending the fighting. About 500,000 Cambodians had died during the Civil War, yet the worst was still to come. The Khmer Rouge communists and their insane leader Pol Pot came to power in 1975, and almost immediately the Khmer Rouge forcibly evacuated Phnom Penh's 2.5 million residents. Most of these were civil servants, doctors, lawyers, teachers, and other highly educated professionals. These people were deemed intellectuals and therefore anti-revolutionary, and they were stripped of their homes and private possessions and forced into slave labor, working in the fields and rice paddies with the peasants. The Khmer Rouge's most notorious prison, S-21, which held up to 20,000 prisoners, had only 7 survivors and was revealed in May 1979. That death camp was converted into the Tuol Sleng Genocide Museum. In fact, Pol Pot operated over 150 Khmer Rouge death camps. It seems ironic that a French-educated intellectual would purge all of the other intellectuals in the country to impose his communist ideals, but that was the Marxist game plan. Between 1975 and 1979, the Khmer Rouge genocide killed between 1.5 and 2 million people, nearly 25% of Cambodia's entire population. During the genocide, China was the main international patron of the Khmer Rouge, supplying more than 15,000 military advisors and most of its external aid, and therefore was complicit. This was all part of Pol Pot's re-education program, and it was a brutal process. One prime example of those targeted was Dr. Heng S. Ngor, who was trained as a surgeon and gynecologist. His practice was in the capital, Phnom Penh, when the Khmer Rouge seized control of the country and renamed it the Democratic Republic of Kampuchea. Thousands of highly educated people were murdered in their homes and in the streets in a political and social cleansing operation, as they were considered a threat to the limited intellects of the mainly illiterate peasant communist forces. Ngor knew that he had to conceal his education, medical skills, and even the fact that he wore glasses, which meant that he had financial means, ergo some form of high-paying employment, or running the risk of being perceived as an intellectual to avoid the new regime's intense hostility towards intellectuals and professionals. Dr. Ngor was expelled from Phnom Penh along with the bulk of its more than 2 million inhabitants as part of the Khmer Rouge's Year Zero social experiment. He and his wife, Mi Hoi, along with thousands of others, were imprisoned in a concentration camp, and she died giving birth along with their unborn child. Although he was a highly trained gynecologist, he was unable to treat his wife, who needed a cesarean section, as that would have ensured that they were all killed. Finally, after the guards were distracted during a mass execution and their attention was diverted by the Vietnamese army invading, he eventually crawled between Khmer Rouge and Vietnamese lines to safety in a Red Cross refugee camp, and eventually left with his niece for the United States. Dr. Ngor was unable to resume his medical practice in the United States, but he became an actor and starred with Sam Waterston in the highly acclaimed film The Killing Fields. Ngor is the only actor of Asian descent to win an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. At first, Pol Pot largely governed from behind the scenes. He became Prime Minister in 1976 after Prince Norodom Sihanouk was forced to resign. By that time, border skirmishes were occurring regularly between the Cambodians and the Vietnamese. The fighting intensified in 1977, and in December 1978, the Vietnamese sent more than 60,000 troops, along with air and artillery units, across the border. On January 7, 1979, they captured Phnom Penh and forced Pol Pot to flee back into the jungle, where he resumed guerrilla operations. The world was learning of the mass murders by Pol Pot in violation of all the existing conventions regarding armed conflict and human rights. This included more than 30,000 Vietnamese civilians who had been tortured and murdered by Pol Pot's forces. Thousands of Vietnamese were forcibly taken back across the border as slave labor to work the rice paddies and work on building projects. A prime example for the Vietnamese retaliation was the Ba Chuk massacre, when the Khmer Rouge tortured and killed the entire population of over 3,000 people, with only one woman surviving to tell the tale. Even Communist Vietnam, with its own blood-stained history, had seen enough and invaded Cambodia in late 1978. In a clear display of communist fratricide, China, who supported Pol Pot's madness, invaded Vietnam in February 1979, a month after Vietnam captured Phnom Penh on January 9th. During the Cambodian genocide, the bones of millions of people who died from malnutrition, overwork, or inadequate health care joined those who were just executed, filling up the mass graves across the country. Under Pol Pot, the state controlled all aspects of a person's life: money, private property, jewelry, gambling, Most reading material and religions were outlawed. Agriculture was collectivized. Children were taken from their homes and forced into the military and communist indoctrination, the re-education camps, and strict rules governed sexual relations, vocabulary, how someone even spoke, and clothing. These laws were laid down and renamed in the name of the country Democratic Kampuchea. Throughout the 1980s, the Khmer Rouge received arms from China and political support from the United States, ironically enough, which opposed the decade-long Vietnamese occupation. But the Khmer Rouge's influence began to decrease following a 1991 ceasefire agreement, and the movement completely collapsed by the end of that decade. In 1997, a Khmer Rouge splinter group captured Pol Pot and placed him under house arrest. He died in his sleep in An Long Veng village, Odar Minji, on April 15, 1998, at age 72, due to heart failure. Despite the millions killed due to the tyrannical regime, the United Nations-backed Human Rights Criminal Tribunal has convicted only a handful of Khmer Rouge leaders for crimes against humanity. We hope you enjoyed this segment of Forgotten History. Please click like and subscribe for free. And please stay tuned and be engaged and informed. Send us comments if you have questions or even show ideas, and we will respond to all requests and comments as soon as we can. Thank you.